Welcome to Salt of the Earth Farm Stories, where the heart of farming comes alive. From the soil that nurtures our crops to the animals that roam our pastures, we'll explore the beauty and challenges of life on the farm. So grab your boots as we celebrate the stories that connect us to the land and each other.
I was invited to look at a site, 300 acres in Wood End with blackberries and gorse, and I remember standing there thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. The owner wanted me to do it without chemicals, and I thought, I think I need a goat. And it was like divine intervention.
And it was exactly that, a divine intervention. In today's episode, we chat with the very clever Colin Arnold from Graze Away, a true innovator in the world of land management. Colin is transforming spaces overrun with woody weeds into thriving, inviting ecosystems full of native grasses, rich ground cover and buzzing with native wildlife. It all started with a life-changing moment in his teenage years involving insecticides, a moment that sparked his journey toward sustainable chemical-free solutions. Colin harnesses the natural destructive power of goats, yes, goats, to clear invasive species like blackberry and ivy. In doing so, he's not only reviving landscapes, but also supporting native bird life, encouraging reptiles, and protecting the vital mycorrhizal networks in our soils. From fencing tips to the role of allelopathic plants and a client base that stretches from small backyards to large recreational areas right in the heart of Melbourne, we cover it all. This episode is proudly brought to you by Kiewa Catchment Landcare groups. Ready to hear how goats can be the unlikely heroes of land regeneration? Let's get into it. Good morning, Colin.
Good morning, how are you?
Really good, mate. And thanks for this morning. Can you tell us where we've been and what we've been looking at this morning?
Well, we've had a quick look at a couple of sites that we've done for quite a while now, a number of years. And you've seen the after, and I've shown you some images of the before. The before was a landscape in a public park that was filled with hawthorns and willows and blackberry and ivy, and just a neglected area within a beautifully manicured park. And we had it fenced, and we put the goats in, and we've transformed that to still plenty of grassy weeds, but mainly now tussocks all through it, carrocks, beautiful ground cover story, indigenous flora that should be there, and all the main woody weeds are gone.
And beautiful to look at. It was along the edge of a running track and set in a really nice scene. The feral animals are gone. Yep. There was birds there. It was a nice spot to be.
Yeah, that's right. And a very heavily patronised park by the public who walk their dogs, who have picnics, play cricket, and they love the goats.
Now, going back to your teenage years, Colin, you were inside a glass house at one point. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think that the point that really had a big impact on me, I was 16 years old, just started my apprenticeship in a large nursery where we had these two beautiful big greenhouses full of indoor plants, and they'd just been sprayed a day or two beforehand to control mealybug and aphids and insects on the indoor plants. My job was to go and open the vents, ventilate the glasshouse so we could go in and work. And in the process of doing that, I found these beautiful 3 very large green tree frogs that had come down on plants from Queensland, and they were dying. And seeing them die as a result of the insecticide that had been sprayed really, really changed my life, I think.
At an early stage in your career too?
Yeah, very young, fresh out of school, and really innocent, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, just loved horticulture, loved growing plants, loved the thought of working in a nursery, but just was really dismayed, I think, that we could have such a profoundly bad impact on a species that was really innocent, if you like, and just copped that spray and was killed because of it.
Can you tell me about Graze Away and what you do, how it works, and what sparked this interest?
I guess because I did work as a nurseryman for many years, I supplied a lot of plants for the regen industry. So I, as well as growing plants in a nursery situation, I saw the need to provide plants for bush regen, and I saw how sites were often prepared for those plants. So a lot of herbicide being used, a lot of control of blackberries and ivy, and all the things that were problematic on that creek bank or that area of landscape that needed to be regenerated. because I'd had experience in reducing the amount of chemicals we used in nurseries very successfully, herbicides and insecticides and fungicides, all those things that you need to grow plants, I also then saw the need to manage, or to see a better way to manage weeds without spraying them. If we can reduce the amount of chemical we're putting into the environment, both for the environment's sake, but also our sake as people having to do it, that's got to be a better thing. And so I focused my attention on trying to control primarily at first blackberries and gorse, so that we could get rid of those without actually poisoning the environment with lots of different sort of herbicides. There's many different herbicides we use on different weeds. And if we could reduce that or eliminate it, that would be a great thing.
And how are you doing it?
Well, I was invited to look at a site, 300 acres in Woodend with blackberries and gorse. And I remember standing there thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. The owner wanted me to do it without chemicals. And I thought, I think I need a goat. And it was like divine intervention. I'm a city boy, knew nothing about goats, but investigated goats, found out that yes, they in fact do eat woody weeds particularly. They love grass, they love grazing on grass, but they love blackberries and broom and honeysuckle and hawthorn and all the problematic species that we have in our riparian zones particularly. So we got some goats, we tested them out, and I was amazed at what they did, and we cleared 300 acres of those problem species.
300 acres, that's a task.
Yeah, it was a big task, took a number of years. And the gorse was particularly hard. Blackberries are easy. Goats love blackberries. They'll just clamber all over blackberries and kill them, flatten them down on the ground. Gorse is a little bit different. They need a bit of help. But if you can get gorse down, either by slashing or whatever means, any of the regrowth, they just love. They just eat it and eat it and eat it and eat it.
And tell me about them being browsers.
Yeah, well, I see, unlike sheep or cattle that are largely grazers, so they'll graze grass, while goats will do that too, goats fill that niche in the environment where they'll actually browse. So they'll eat foliage on trees and they'll stand up on their hind legs and eat up to 6 or 7 foot high, depending on how big the goat is. And so they fill that rather special little area in the environment where while cattle might nibble at trees, horses might nibble at trees, and sheep a little bit, goats love them and they demolish anything they can reach. Now, of course, that often gives them a bad reputation. They get a bad rap for eating everything or being very destructive. And I understand that. And to some extent, we take advantage of their ability to be very destructive on some plants because, well, there's nothing more destructive than attacking a willow with a chainsaw. That's pretty destructive. But if you've got an animal that can do it, much more gentle in the environment, it's a much cleaner, greener, more sustainable way of achieving a greater result on woody weeds, but many other plants as well.
And tell me a little bit about the goat. When did they arrive in the country?
Yeah, I think they came out with the first fleet, I think. They right from the word go, they were brought out. They've played a really important role, like goats have played around the world, but of course, when animals escape, whether it's a pig or a goat or a horse, and they're roaming free, there can be issues with that, and there certainly is with goats. And so unmanaged feral goats can be a big problem. And the difference with ours is ours are managed and they've got a good temperament, and we put them on and off sites so we get a managed, well, sort of properly managed result.
I was going to ask about temperament. That's what you look for in your breeding cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, temperament's important. You know, I get phone calls all the time from people saying, oh, look, I've got a couple of goats. We don't need them anymore. Would you like them? And usually they're offering you a goat that they can't keep in because it's jumping the fence, it's going under the fence, it's got a bad temperament, it'll headbutt them if they walk into the paddock. So we have goats that tend not to do that. They can jump the fence, but they've got the temperament not to do that. We breed into that. If we've got an animal that's got a bad temperament, we don't breed with it. And they're all very gentle, and so that's what you're aiming for. In the same way that you're breeding animals to be a pedigree, to be good production of wool or meat or milk, we're breeding for temperament.
Very good. Now, Graze Away, you'll go into places that have got a problem with all these weeds that we've talked about. You'll take in sometimes a temporary fence, or you'll do more of a permanent fence, and you'll manage that for a period of time.
Yep.
You'll bring in a bunch of goats for possibly a couple of weeks at a time or longer and move them on again. And is your idea for the goat to go and attack the weed that we're trying to get rid of mainly? And is it that they'll just eat the tips?
Yep.
And not the roots and pick out all our native grasses?
Yeah.
But they'll aim for the hardier, woodier stuff first?
Look, when we put a goat onto a site, what they'll always do is they'll run around and look for the yummy things first. They'll look for the lollipops, they'll look for the ice cream, and that's usually seeds. They love seeds. They love woody plants like trees. They'll look for all the preferential grazing first. But every site is different. Some sites have only blackberries, some sites have ivy, some sites have honeysuckle, or it might be just grassy weeds. It might be dominated by kikuyu or phalaris, or the list of weeds is as long as your arm, isn't it? So there's a whole range. They fill every niche. There are climates. I mentioned ivy, but ivy runs up trees. It's not only a ground cover, it runs up trees, will kill mature 70-year-old eucalypts. So there isn't a better animal that will tackle a wide variety of vegetation, both native and exotic. Yes, they eat native plants, and we'd love it if they didn't, but they do. But you know, there are some plants that we have problems with that are native as well. There are plants like Phragmites or bulrushes in waterways and dams that actually choke up waterways. And so we use goats in those situations with a tremendous result. And the benefit of that is that instead of having one or two native or indigenous species that dominate to the point where nothing else can grow, we thin those out. We don't necessarily eliminate them, but we get a broader mix of the smaller native plants, the caryxes, the isolepsis, the persicarias, that also inhabit those riparian areas, those wet areas. And so we actually, with goats, increase the biodiversity.
Yeah, and so if the goat is only eating the leafy stuff and the woody stuff at the top and they're not eating the roots, it'll shoot again. They'll keep coming back and attack that plant again, such as a blackberry. Does that heart of that blackberry end up giving up, going, I just can't photosynthesize anymore, and give up and die?
That's exactly it. So if you stop any plant from photosynthesizing, it dies because it can't feed itself. So goats simply eat the leaves. Now on blackberries, they can eat some of the soft tips, and on some situations, if we push the goats hard, and occasionally we do, they'll eat the canes quite back to, say, as thick as your little finger. So they'll actually eat that cane if you push them. But you don't need to do that. All you need to do is keep putting them on so they keep taking the leaves off. And if they keep taking the leaves off, the plant will die. So, for example, a willow. We can have a willow that might be 20 or 30 feet high, like 5 or 6 metres high. If we cut that down, usually we'll cut it in such a way that the top comes to ground. All that foliage that they can't reach is brought down to ground level. The goats will clamber all over that and pick every leaf off it. Now, if the top is still attached to the roots, because we've only cut it halfway through, then that tree's still alive. It'll keep producing more leaves. They'll keep picking them off. And eventually the tree will die because, yes, it might have roots in the soil that are untouched, but if it's not photosynthesizing, it's going to die.
And once we've got rid of some of these invasive species, it'll let some sunlight in for all our good ones and natives to flourish.
Yeah. I mean, you often get, and it doesn't matter whether you're grazing or whether you're spraying or whether you're mowing, when you take out a huge amount of biomass or a huge amount of weed growth or vegetation, probably better to put it that way, you'll often get a lot of weeds growing because you might have weeds that haven't been able to grow because it's been dominated by one or two species. So you take those one or two species out or thin them out, and all of a sudden thistles start growing and other things start growing, and you think, well, it hasn't worked. But it has, because what you're doing is you're giving all that seed that's in the soil a chance to grow, and it grows, and the goats are working on that site and they're eating those weeds, they're eating the thistles, or they're eating whatever it is that's germinating. And so you're working on that seed bank and you're reducing the number of weeds that are there. And look, quite frankly, the nature of weeds, it probably means that it might take years to eliminate that. You will get natural regen in some cases, or sometimes we actually plant. We don't wait for the regen because it's been so abused for so long. There are no native plants there anymore. So we plant things in there that we know the goats will tend not to eat, or we know that they'll preferentially graze the weeds over those things.
Now, I've got a burning question. You said before the goats love the seeds, and these could be bad seeds from bad weeds.
Yep.
I know if a cow eats some seeds, it'll go straight through its body and poo it out, and that seed will germinate, and there's more of those plants around.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a goat's gut and a cow's gut, for example?
Yeah, look, so there are a number of questions that I always get asked, and that's one of them. So do they spread seeds? Well, I suppose they can potentially spread seeds if a seed sticks to their coat. The seed can stick to the coat and drop off later on. That is potentially a problem. I don't think it's a problem, but let's say technically it's a problem. The goats, I think, have 2 or 3 stomachs as well. I think a goat even has 4. Okay, so goats are traditionally come from areas where they don't have lovely fields of green grass. They're in rocky areas, they're on mountains, they're in deserts. They're an arid country animal, so there's not a lot of grass necessarily. So they're browsing. And so sometimes that browse material is not nutritious. It might be, but it might not be. So they've got to chew the cud. They've got to really work that material to get the most out of it. So they'll chew it and chew it and chew it, and in their 4 stomachs they'll digest it more than most other animals, so that the opportunity for a seed, even if it survives and it's not crushed, so like a bean seed, if it passes through and it doesn't actually get crushed in the chewing motion of their teeth, the chemical nature and the temperature of their body, apparently they operate slightly more higher temperature, and so that kills most seeds. So it's a pretty well established fact that most seeds die in the digestive system of a goat. Whatever that process, whether it's the chewing of the cud, whether it's the temperature of the goat, whether it's the 4 stomachs, whatever it is, or the combination of all.
I'm liking the goat more and more. But some people might say, look, it'll be so much quicker. I'll come in with some glyphosate, spray the whole lot and walk away, job done.
Yeah, and we get that all the time. So whether you're putting in a machine to spray it or whether you're putting in a machine to groom it, so a lot of organisations will groom a site. So they'll put in a bobcat with a flail mower on the front and they'll overnight just change the site. Boom! It's completely dramatically changed. Or you've sprayed it and within days there's a big change. The beauty of a goat is the change is a little bit more gradual. Now, I think we can all sit here and agree that the pressure on the environment is immense, isn't it? Mm-hmm. The pressures have been there for years, either from overgrazing or neglect, and it's been filled with weeds that have taken over and changed the whole landscape, the soil, just everything about that site. So to put an animal in, or a team of animals that will gradually work through that, open it up, not necessarily kill every plant, but just change, bring more light in, more air movement, because the mass of foliage has been opened up. So you've got a more gradual change. So the birds, the skinks, whatever is there, has a bit more opportunity to realise there's change happening. Maybe we move out, maybe we nest somewhere else, or maybe we just avoid that goat. It's much easier for a skink to avoid a goat than it is a bobcat with a flail mower on the front. And those things are really important because, yeah, we love big change quickly, but let's take another look at the environment and say, all these other pressures, let's reduce that pressure. Let's make that a more environmentally sympathetic and sensitive approach.
And talking about sensitivity, you can work close to houses, you can work close to creeks.
Yep.
You can get to spots where humans can't get to with a chemical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. We can put them into sites where goats, it's a fun park for them. You know, they're jumping up onto logs and and car bodies and things like that are really hazardous for us. They're hazardous for machinery. They make operating in that area with whatever approach you've got difficult or sometimes even impossible for goat. No problem at all.
When you're working alongside waterways, there's no risk of chemicals going into the water. And we still want ground cover, don't we, beside those waterways?
Yeah.
To keep that soil stable?
Yeah.
So a goat will keep some ground cover there
Yeah.
if it's properly managed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's a key point. So if we spray it with chemical, we can defoliate whatever's there. We can actually even create bare ground, which is obviously problematic. We want, I often say to people, we want to open the site up. So we want to create some bare ground. It's not that we want to look at a site that's completely denuded of foliage. That is not what we want. But we want an area that might be, say, covered in wandering trad. Now, wandering trad or ivy is a dense cover, so no light gets through. But if you spray it and kill it with probably a pretty nasty chemical, you're going to defoliate it, you can have bare ground. Well, that is problematic, particularly in a riparian area where you've got waterways or a drain or where water can flow. Whereas if you're grazing it, the plant's still there. Even if it's grazed really short, the root system is still there. The soil is still intact. So it's about managing that well.
You've shown me some spots this morning where the ivy was climbing, 12 feet up some beautiful old gum trees.
Yep.
And not letting anything else grow.
Yep.
But now it's flourishing with all the good stuff. Not a spot of ivy anywhere.
No, actually, funnily enough, ivy is actually really easy to control with goats. It's difficult to control in any other way. It has a shiny leaf, so the chemical runs off it really easily. So you need to put a surfactant in with the chemical so that it breaks down that waxy layer on the leaf so that it penetrates the foliage. So that's sometimes, there's arguably the additive to the chemical to make it penetrate the plant is just as harmful, if not more harmful, than the chemical.
Really?
Yeah. There's lots of stories and theories about that. But goats just love ivy. So they'll strip it completely back, and then you've got a network of stems on the ground, just wiry stems. And when it runs up a tree, often you can't see for the leaves of the ivy. You can't see the stem of the ivy easily. But you put goats in there, they'll strip every leaf off. The stem just stands out like a neon sign on the trunk of the tree, and you go through with a saw or a tomahawk. You cut the stem of the ivy. Everything above the cut dies. So your tree might be 30 or 40 feet high with a complete overgrowth of ivy right up to the canopy, and you've killed it just by cutting it with a chainsaw, a tomahawk or something like that, or a pair of secateurs or something like that. Because the goats have made it easy. They've taken all the ground ivy off. Plant can't survive. Very simple. Very, very simple.
And these goats can take a lot of risk away from fires?
Well, yeah, look, fire is a bit of a big issue, isn't it? We deal with fuel load in all sorts of situations, close to houses, close to main roads, and the risk of bushland, whether it's planted bush or native natural bushland, becoming a thicket, becoming overgrown, to burn that out, whether it's in a controlled burn, carefully managed. There are all sorts of associated issues with that. Even some of the best cool burns we do can impact on hollow trees, hollow logs on the ground, those sorts of areas. So burning off, whether it's a raging bushfire or a controlled burn, can really impact on the native environment. And will indiscriminately take out whatever lights up, whatever burns. But if you can put goats in, they'll thin that foliage out, they'll take out a lot of the thicket, they'll open it up and make it either much easier or make a fuel load reduction burn unnecessary or much less risk.
Yeah, or not at all. How do goats improve habitat for reptiles and small animals?
Well, I think that some of the skinks and things that we have around require some open ground. You'll often, if you ever see a skink, you'll see it on open ground or basking on a rock, warming themselves in the sun. So they need that sort of open area. They need to be able to move from thickets into open areas. When a skink or a snake is in an open area, it's vulnerable to being picked off by a kookaburra or a a predatory bird. So goats will go into an area, they'll open it up that might otherwise be a thicket where kookaburras and birds like that can't see them. But you see, we create both open areas and areas of tussock grasses so skinks and other small mammals that might be little bilbies or any of the native mice or rats that might frequent those areas, they can duck in and out of cover. Little wrens will duck in and out of cover. If it's a solid mass, it might be helpful in one sense, but it doesn't allow predatory birds to easily feed themselves either. So we need that perfect balance of open ground and thickets, native grasses that are short, that are grazed by wallabies and kangaroos and wombats, but with areas of tussocks or shrubbery so that we've got cover, so they've got protection, but we've got opportunity for predatory birds to feed.
So goats aren't just mowing weeds, they're breaking the cycle, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Because we manage them, we're constantly assessing whether or not a particular plant, whether it's an exotic, unwanted plant or an indigenous plant that's required, but potentially can dominate. And if it can dominate, even if it's indigenous, it's potentially problematic. So a good example is Phragmites. Phragmites is a riparian plant that can just dominate. Comes up out of the water, grows meters back from the waterline, and can be so thick that it's perfect habitat for rabbits and foxes. And so they're moving in and out of that. They're feeding on blackberries, bringing that seed back in with their droppings, dropping it in amongst Phragmites that we can't get through because it's like trying to walk through a wall of bamboo. You can't do it, but they happily live in there. Foxes will thrive in there, but they're depositing seed from their droppings into those places. So blackberries are growing, ivy is growing. So to put a goat in there to open that up, to thin it out, not necessarily eliminate that Phragmites, but to open it up, means that we've still got the plant, it still has habitat value, but it's not a problem.
And how do you stop your goats from wandering off?
Well, that's always the challenge. And goats are extremely good at getting out. So you do need a good fence. It needs to be a good permanent fence. And we have specs that we supply our clients with regarding exactly the kind of fence we like to use. And it's your typical hinge joint fence, but it's not 90 high with, say, 2 plain wires on the top. It's 120 high, 1 metre 20 high. It's well tensioned, so it's taut, it's rigid, it's not sloppy, because if a fence gets sloppy, goats will squeeze out underneath it. So that's great for a permanent fence. Not all our clients want permanent fences. Some of them want a 2 or 3 year operation with the goats, so we'll put up a temporary fence. And we use a temporary portable fence that's made in Melbourne. It's cost effective compared to the sort of imported fences that are the same or similar. And it's a very good fence. We use it on a lot of sites. We've used it on Landcare sites, Melbourne water sites, council sites. Very effective. It's not cheap, but it gives that great result.
And tell me about the small goats. Can they be a bit more beneficial?
Yeah, well, look, big goats, some of our big goats will stand 6-7 foot high and have a good reputation for being destructive. So when we're doing regen, where we've got the bulk of the weeds under control or the vegetation under control, then we'll use small goats. And sometimes very small goats, when they've just been weaned, so they've just come off their mum, they're 4 months, 5 months old, we'll put them into sites where we've got regen happening, and they'll do the finer work, the smaller work. They'll operate more at ground level. They'll still eat blackberries and all the weeds, but because we've done regen in there, we've got most of the big weeds down. They just nicely go through, pick off, look for the sweet little grasses and things like that.
So the big goats have still got a purpose. It's quite hard to imagine that you said they'll browse at 7 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
That's quite high. What's it like having goats in suburban parks?
Well, it's lovely. It's lovely because we change an area that's often in a public park that's a mess. And so people can, we do one particular park, which is a manicured park, beautifully looked after park, where people picnic and play cricket with their kids, have barbecues, walk their dogs, ride their bikes, all of that sort of scene. And they come up to the fence and they see the goats, they bring their children, they bring their grandchildren, and they pat the goats, they want to have their photo taken with the goats. People come up to me and say how important my goats are to them. They've had all sorts of reasons why they just love to sit there. Some people do yoga next to my goats. We get all the different stories, and it's nice in public parks. We do a job in Collingwood, in amongst on a vacant building site, surrounded by residential area, factories and cafes. And we can never go there quickly to check the animals because we always get stopped by people telling us how wonderful it is.
And they're characters to look at, aren't they?
They are, and some goats are real characters, and they can be very playful, and people can't help but sort of pull some grass out of the pavement somewhere and stick it through the fence, and the goats come up and eat it. Yeah, it's lovely.
And kids must love them.
Yeah, kids do love them, and for a lot of these kids, they've never seen a goat like that, or if they have, they've never been that close to it. Sure, we can go to Collingwood Children's Farm or somewhere like that, but in an urban environment, it's pretty unusual, and they love it. And
nice to see that connection to animals. And talking about kids, I can hear some kids in the background, but it's not one of your 14 grandkids.
No, we're sitting here actually, and we've got a little area just outside here where we've got 4 little young goats. They're actually about 6 months old. So a very urban yard. We do a lot of urban yards, backyards particularly.
Really?
Yeah, we do. And actually we got called recently by a real estate agent who had to clean up a yard that had been a property that had been rented out. The tenant had neglected the garden totally. It was a complete mess. The tenant left, and so they called us in to completely clean it up.
How long did that take?
Well, we're still doing that job, but we've done similar jobs like that before. It usually takes 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how bad it is. Sometimes the back fence, which might be a typical suburban timber fence or whatever, 6-foot high fence, completely covered in ivy or morning glory or jasmine or something that's just gone feral. We put the goats in, they just pull it off the fence, they eat it all up. Nothing goes to landfill at all, just turns to poo, goes back into the ground, into the grass. And we've never had a client that wasn't absolutely delighted.
And I guess even in big industrial sites too, where they've been let go or not used for a while, or they're waiting on council permits or something, you can get them in there for that. We looked at a site this morning near a golf course. It was overrun. You've been in there for quite a few years now. And stripped out everything, and now it's a beautiful spot to look at.
It looks like it's been mown, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It looks like, that's right. So some of the jobs, it looks like it's been manicured beautifully, brush cut right to the walls and the edges, and yet it's only goats.
Yeah. So Colin, who hires you?
Look, we work for all sorts of authorities. So water authorities, work for metro trains, we work for councils. We've done all sorts of work. We've done work on some military sites. There's no end to the client base. It's just a matter of budget, and there's no end of sites. There's a million sites where we could put goats, but it's up to the people and whether they can find the budget to do it.
And this is carefully managed by you, isn't it? Like, you're not just putting them in there and walking away, coming back 6 months later. What happens in that process? Yeah,
that's right. The Department of Ag have said to me, how often do you check your goats? Because we really need you to check them every day. Now, we actually don't check them every day, but on most of our sites, the public sees them every day, and large numbers of public see them every day. So they are constantly looked at. Usually our phone number is on a sign on the gate or on the fence. So people can call us if they're concerned that they haven't got water, or the water trough's empty, or it's been knocked over, or one's got a limp. If there's any issue, they can call us. But the authorities keep an eye on them as well. But we would certainly look at them at least once a week.
Right.
Sure.
And as you're monitoring, you're going, okay, within the next week, it's time to move them out. We still want to protect a certain grass or a certain plant that's there. And then you'll come back perhaps a month later.
Yeah.
Right. So you might have dozens or quite a few sites around Melbourne
Yep.
with goats on them at the moment that you've got to go and monitor.
Yep.
Any standout projects that come to mind?
Look, I think probably the standout project for me, there's a number of them, but the one that really interests me is one we're doing in a winery. There is a movement within the vineyard industry now to better manage their vineyards, use less chemical, try and create habitat within the vineyard so that they have predatory insects that'll predate on aphids and other insects on the vines, and birds, improve the bird life. So we're working particularly with one vineyard at the moment, and we've set up 3 sites. We've got goats in there, and we're in the process of having brought the vegetation under control. That was very difficult. That was very bad, I should say. Now we're starting to plant things in that site where we can actually get flowers, which will bring a whole host of insects and a whole host of birds and bats at night as well, feeding on those insects. So we're just trying to improve all of that habitat within what is essentially a monoculture of vines. Yeah, so that's particularly exciting.
What's the biggest challenge?
I think, well, fencing is the biggest challenge because goats are good at getting out. So, and from time to time, we've had goats get out because either a fence hasn't been appropriate or a fence is old, and where we thought it was secure, it wasn't. And sometimes you can't tell because the vegetation is all over the fence. So that's a challenge. But I think the other big challenge is just getting authorities to appreciate the fact that we've got to use less chemical. We've got to be kinder to the environment. We've got to understand that every time we apply a chemical, there's unforeseen collateral damage. There is impact on the soil. We know that herbicides affect what we call the mycorrhizal association, the association between fungi in the soil and plants. So just like regenerative agriculture or organic agriculture or farming or biodynamic farming, we're particularly interested in looking after the soil. And a goat will do that really well. Even though it's a hard-hoofed animal, it walks quite gently on the environment, on the ground. It doesn't compact the ground in the same way. So it's eating a weed or it's eating a plant. Those droppings are full of bacteria and fungi from the gut of the animal. And so that feeds the soil just like fertilizer does, probably more so, with things that are full of trace elements of bacteria that are really important. So elements become available through that process that might not have been available before. So they're critically important, and getting authorities to understand that, other than, oh, let's just spray it. Let's just get rid of those weeds. I don't care how quickly we do it, just do it. This is a much better way.
Could this model scale up nationally?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've touched on fuel load. Fuel load's a big one. So vegetation management covers all of those things. Vegetation management with animals covers fuel load. It covers problematic vegetation that shouldn't be there. It covers indigenous or native vegetation that's out of control, that's problematic, because we're getting diminished biodiversity because certain native plants are dominating. A really good example of that is Malakuta. If you look at Malakuta, you walk along the foreshore at Malakuta now, where we had terrible fires in 2019, wiped out vast areas of coastal bushland. Now when you walk through that, there's, in many cases, 2 or 3 species that dominate. Yes, they're native, but they're dominating to the point where all the other native species can't grow. So we've got out of balance system, and that really is problematic. So we could roll this out nationally. We could control a whole lot of things and be much kinder to the environment.
How can people learn more about Graze Away?
Well, there's a few podcasts on Tim Thompson Farming YouTube.
YouTube, yeah.
So certainly look up Tim Thompson and goats. You can look up Gardening Australia website and look up Colin's goats on there. I've got a Facebook page that people can look up. If you Google Colin Arnold goats or goats, you'll probably find me anyway.
As I did.
As you did.
So how can someone hire your goats?
Well, look, all of our work is by word of mouth, so we don't sort of advertise or push the program. But people can just ring me. They can look me up on online and give me a call. Go on my Facebook page, send me a text, and we'll respond to that.
And that could answer my next question, but any advice for someone wanting to manage land differently?
I think if you want to manage land differently and you want to be kind to the environment, be better to the wildlife, seriously consider goats. But I would also seriously consider not necessarily buying them, but hiring them for all the reasons we've touched on. When you hire goats, you've got goats coming on and off your property. Because in the same way that if you have weeds or vegetation that are growing out of control and they're impacting on the environment in a negative way, if you have goats or any animal overgrazing or they're too long, that's going to have a negative impact as well. And what you can have is if you only ever graze with goats on the same site over and over again, you can end up with weeds that might be there that the goats won't eat. So you can have weeds that they don't eat that might start to dominate, and that's problematic as well. It's a skill. Managing an animal is a skill, and doing anything well requires skill. Driving a car well requires skill. Managing goats is the same. You need to know what you're doing, and if you don't know what you're doing but you want to do it, talk to people like me, hire goats through people like me. There are other people that do it regionally, not only me. I do it largely in Melbourne. There are regional people.
Yep. I love this concept. I can't argue against it. I'm all for the goats. I've heard you use the word allelopathic. Have I said that right?
You have said that right.
What is it?
Some plants are just bullies. So blackberry is a bully. He'll just dominate because he's bigger and stronger, grows vigorously. He can start off in shade under trees, but eventually he'll just muscle everything else out. And that long cane will just stretch out across through the air and then eventually touch the ground. And where it touches the ground, it produces a new plant and it'll do this. And so it'll literally walk along the environment. Okay. But some plants are different. They're what we call allelopathic. And a little plant like buttercup grows probably 30 or 40 centimetres high, and yet it can dominate. It can be the only plant growing in that area. And you think, how does a little plant dominate? It dominates because it's allelopathic, which means it produces compounds that it releases into the soil that reduces or inhibits the growth of other plants. So only it can grow. Now, it's a bit like a plant that produces herbicide. It's effectively doing that. And so sometimes allelopathic plants can be beneficial to other plants, but often in terms of weeds, they're very, they compromise the environment enormously. Another one that does that is drain sedge or nutgrass, we often call it. That's also allelopathic. So that can dominate and completely take over.
Right. All right, Colin, I've been looking forward to this part. These are the off-the-wall questions. These can be just short answers. Do goats ever get a smoko break?
Well, they do, and often they'll pick it themselves, and I'll roll up with the boss of the site to have a look at how the goats are going, and they're sitting there in the sun doing nothing, and it looks bad. It looks really bad. So they'll sit down and chew the cud and just relax in the sunshine, but they'll also sit there at 2 o'clock in the morning and eat.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do any of them show any leadership potential? Like, do you have a CEO?
Well, there are certainly dominant goats that tell everybody else to get out of my space. And so they can be, we talked about temperament. They can be gentle to me, but they're bullies to each other.
Are there any standout personalities?
Yeah, there's always one that'll want to come up and have a cuddle. You get the odd goat and he looks up and he sees you and he runs up as if to say, oh, I haven't seen you for ages. And they'll put their head against your chest and they'll just stand there and say, I've missed you.
And do any of them have names?
No, people ask me that all the time, and I don't name my goats because when you have as many goats as I do, you just can't.
Can't name them.
Or if I do, I can't talk about that publicly.
Right, okay. No one's listening, mate, come on. If goats had a theme song, what would it be?
Look, I don't know, but somebody asked me once, a commentator on radio asked me, what's the collective noun of a goat? And I said, well, the collective noun of a goat is a herd, but I prefer to call a collective noun of a goat a chaos of goats.
Chaos of goats.
Because they can be quite chaotic if they want to be. Yeah.
And also the greatest of all time.
Yeah, that's right. The greatest of all time. Yeah.
Do goats have best friends?
Yeah, they do. And sometimes you'll see a mum sitting with 2 or 3 other goats and you realise that they're the kids that they had, but they've all grown up and become adult goats. So they sit together in little family groups. They can do that. Yeah.
Interesting. If goats could talk, what do you reckon they'd say about their job?
Well, I think generally speaking, they'd say, where are we off to next? This is great. We love it.
What's a goat's idea of a perfect day?
A perfect day is about 30 degrees, a bit of shade, lots of nice green, fresh grass, and the ability to walk wherever they want. A lot of people tether goats. We don't tether our goats.
Right.
They like to roam free.
Yeah.
Like
nice.
any animal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this next one, but what's your favourite tool? Could be something living or not.
Well, it has to be a goat.
Thank you. What time of the day do goats get their best work done?
In the morning. In the morning, I'd say, yeah, the sun comes up, they greet the sunshine and think, right, let's get into it, and a whole new day ahead. So I think they're as excited about their work as I am.
Fantastic. Now, one last question. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
It'd be in Wonthaggi with my kids.
Yeah, nice. Well, Colin, this is a fascinating chat. I love what you're doing. As I said, I can't argue against it. You're very clever, and it hasn't been something that you've just delved into last night. It's been 30 odd years or more of research, and well done, mate. So thanks so much for your time this morning.
Well, thanks, Darren. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it because I could talk about goats with my head in a bucket of wet cement.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Kiewa Catchment Landcare Groups, improving the long-term sustainability of farming and the environment in northeast Victoria. A big thanks to Colin Arnold for sharing his insights, his passion, and some incredible stories from the field. If this episode got you thinking about weeds, wildlife, or even goats in a whole new way, you're not alone. To learn more about Colin's work, Google Colin Arnold at Graze Away. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us and share it with someone who might just be inspired to let a few goats loose on their invasive weeds. Until next time, keep your hands dirty and your spirits high.